When children enter our classrooms, remember, we are just joyfully welcoming them. We are lucky enough to be able to support their self-construction, to be there as they build themselves and provide whatever they need wherever they are in that process of self-construction. That's a joyful, amazing experience for us as guides, and that's how we welcome children into our classrooms. And I'm here to tell you, they will not all come into your classroom reading. Maybe if you only have an upper elementary class, you're more likely to have children enter with their reading skills kind of firmly in place, but even in an upper elementary class, they may not all come into your classroom reading fluently or reading at grade level. They just won't. I mean, we can't make everyone develop on the same timetable. It's okay if they don't come in with those skills in place. We are trained to support children wherever they are in their development. So if those skills aren't in place, we simply help them develop those skills. And we do that while trying to instill confidence and excitement in them in that process. I think particularly with reading, children can very quickly feel isolated and frustrated and behind if they're not reading at the same rate as their peers. And so we want to really support their self-confidence at this time and really provide opportunities for them to develop this skill as quickly as possible, because they're likely feeling it and they're likely kind of stressed or worried about it. So at the beginning of the year, within the first week or two, do some sort of informal assessment of children's reading abilities. You could do a formal assessment, and I know a lot of schools do, but you can also learn a lot simply by observing children, looking at their writing, looking and perhaps asking them to read a little something to you, or watching them as they attempt to do any silent reading themselves. That can give you a lot of feedback on where to start. And where a child might be. You know, I often would have a child I would just say, hey, can you go grab a book that looks interesting to you and let's read a little bit of it together. And I'd, try to I might do some reading, they might do some reading, but I can get a good sense of where they might be based on that. If you use formal assessments, of course, that's going to give you further information as well. We'll talk more about exactly the different things that you can do to get started on this work with children, but get that started early in the school year so that you know where children are, so that you can make a plan for those that need added support. And again, it's going to be one of those things where we're going to really work for 6 weeks on some daily practice and carefully monitor progress before we decide our next steps in supporting this child. Elementary children, especially younger elementary children, are still really fascinated with language, so we can capitalize on that in our work, but that sensitive period is going away. So we have to do other things to drive the child's motivation and interest in this. Again, this will be daily work for about 6 weeks, because with that kind of work with most children, we're going to see significant progress, and we're just going to have to continue to build upon that progress. After 6 weeks with some children, if you're not seeing progress, that's when you're going to need to reach out to your administrator and discuss ways to further support this child, because perhaps there's something else going on there that needs to be addressed or supported. But 6 weeks of practice is really going to do a lot for most children. And then we can just continue to bolster throughout the rest of the year. You'll keep careful, detailed records so that you can see progress. So for example, if a child doesn't know all the letter sounds, then you've got a grid of the different letter sounds and you're crossing them off on the date that they were and letting, the date that it was learned. And you're periodically reviewing to be sure the child keeps that knowledge in their memories, right? So those kinds of things that we really want to have clear records so we know how the child's progressing. This is work the guide does with the children. Perhaps some other adults are supporting that, but the bulk of this practice work is happening with the guide. And it can happen with individual children, but it can happen in small groups as well. You're likely going to have more than one child that can work together on some of these skills. It's going to be fun, it's going to be fast, and it's going to happen at least once a day. As children are learning to read, remind yourself, reading is a difficult skill. It's not one that our brains are actually wired to learn. It's hard for our brains. Remind yourself how hard this is. Maybe, go try to read in another language to remind yourself of the challenge of this skill so that you can be patient. All the adults can sometimes get impatient, especially around reading. Parents are often very nervous and stressed, and we need to support them as they're handling that too, because we don't want that stress or frustration to pass to the child, because that can get in the way of the skill acquisition. So we want to stay really confident and remember that this just takes some children a little more time. Also remember, phonics are an important key. Learning the sounds, the symbols that stand for different sounds. That's an important key. But we don't sound out words for our entire lives. Like, read this sentence. The letters are all jumbled, but accomplished readers can read it because we're so accustomed to particular patterns in words. And if the first and the last letters are correct and it's approximately the size we're expecting, we'll fill in what the word is. So as children are learning to read, we don't want to ignore some of those other skills that support reading development. Phonics are certainly a great foundation, but we also want to help the children learn context and patterns and syntax that are also going to support their reading development. So daily reading practice, partnership and collaboration with children, and confidence that they can develop this skill. It's the basic pattern of how we approach this basic skill development in children in our classrooms.